she was actually held on a hostage for several days in her privada. So privada, it's like a gated community, right? She wasn't allowed to leave. The air got cut off, electricity, the gas. So you want to see that, okay, are they actually doing what they tell you they're going to do? What is the state of the house? Does the house look livable, right? Hola, amiguitos. Welcome back. All right, so for those who are new to me, welcome. My name is Adiola, and I am a Nigerian living in Merida, Yucatan, Mexico. Okay, so today's video will be discussing something that I came across this week on Facebook, one of the many expat Facebook groups that I'm a part of. And it's between a landlord and tenants, right? Landlord versus tenants. Now, this happens everywhere, like bad landlords, bad tenants. This happens all over the world because it's very easy to just stereotype something or to generalize something and say that, okay, it's only unique to a particular country or to a particular group of people, but this happens everywhere, right? So this issue was between a landlord who was trying to, number one, extort money from a previous tenant, and two, tarnish that person's image, right, online or social media. So I read the landlord's post, and even before reading the tenant post, I was like, a lot of the things she was discussing actually isn't even true. So maybe I would just do a screenshot and just share it in this video. And some of the pictures and stuff she was sharing, I was like, okay, these furnitures, they look cheap, and so obviously it's gonna get damaged after use. But yeah, so I read the post from the landlord, and then I looked up the tenant because she actually tagged the tenant. She did a screenshot of the tenant, her husband. She was just like, this landlord, I was just like, this is a landlord from hell. Now I'm gonna be sharing some tips on finding good landlords and good accommodation here in Merida. But I went on the tenant's profile Facebook page, and then she wrote her own part of the story with screenshots and everything, right? And immediately I believed her, right? Even before reading her post, I knew, okay, this landlord is just acting crazy, right? So what happened was that I believe this lady had contacted the landlord from Airbnb. So she rented the place on Airbnb, she liked it, and then she decided to sign a 1-year lease with the landlord. And she has 5 children. So there were about 7 people living in the house, right? And so, with 5 kids, 2 adults, 7 people, of course there will be some wear and tear, right? Furnitures, kitchens, a few things will look used, right? And I believe at the end of the lease, the tenant contacted the landlord and be like, hey, I'm moving out on this day, and this is what's going to happen. So I think something went left, and the landlord, for some reason, locked the gate, and she locked the tenant out, right? Because I think they had already moved out before the end of the lease. So they moved out maybe a couple of weeks earlier, right? So that they could move into the new place and then come back in, send a cleaner to go clean the place, and then fix everything. Because she actually shared a screenshot where the landlord was giving her a quote on how much it would cost to fix all those things, right? So they were actually in communication, but something happened with the landlord. I don't know, maybe the people she was talking to, and then she locked them out, and so they couldn't go in to clean, they couldn't go in to fix anything, and the landlord was now coming after her to extort some money. And you should have seen the message, one of the messages that the landlord had sent. Before even reading the tenant's side, I was like, yeah, this landlord is crazy, right? Because she had sent her a message, and she was like, I'm going to give you 1 hour. After 1 hour, if I don't hear back from you, then I'm blasting you all over social media. Just like threatening somebody, right? 1 hour. It's like, what if when you had sent her that message, what if she was driving? Or what if she was sleeping? Or what if, she was in a hospital? Or what if she had to take care of her child, like one of her 5 kids, or what if she was at work, right? Like you give somebody just 1 hour, not one day, not 1 week, not 2 weeks, 1 hour to respond. And then after that, like she just tarnished those people's images. She posted pictures of their kids. She posted a picture of this lady's passport, yeah, her US passport, with all her personal information online. And so, of course, people came after the landlord. They were like, okay, the kids obviously had nothing to do with it. You shouldn't be posting the kids' faces. And so she just put like a smiley face on the kids' faces to, hide their identities. But she still left the passport there, which I'm not really sure why she would post somebody's passport after you had already posted a screenshot of their Facebook page and their husband's Facebook page. You had tagged them, right? So obviously we could find them, but I don't know why she would post their passport. Like maybe the lady had sent her passport as a proof of ID, but like that's like a breach of contract. Some people were calling it dosing, right? Even a few people, few Mexicans were telling the lady, like, okay, what you're doing right here can actually backfire, right? Like you can actually be sued, you can be arrested. Like you need to stop this. Like there are ways to go around this, right? But yeah, this is crazy. But I think for best explanation, I think I'll just attach the screenshots from the landlord, because she did this to somebody. Yeah, I'm actually gonna leave her name and everything there, right? Because I'm not even gonna try to protect her at all. Because it's like, how can you do that to somebody, right? So yeah, I'm gonna attach, the screenshots and such. So landlords from hell, they exist everywhere, all over the world, right? And sometimes it takes prayers, really, right? Because I've had my own share of landlording. So that's why when people talk about, oh, don't buy a house because it's a money pit, always rent, this and that. I'm like, yeah, that only works for people who were blessed to have a really good landlord, to have a really good landlord-tenant relationship, because there are crazy landlords out there. And sometimes it's worth actually just going and getting your own place if possible. Now, I do know that obviously there are crazy tenants as well, right? Tenants who will damage your property, tenants who will steal your furnitures, tenants who will give you headache upon headache, tenants who will refuse to leave after the end of the lease, tenants who will refuse to pay. So I mean, like it goes on both ends, right? From the landlord side and from the tenant side, right? So I just wish this tenant, I believe her name is Lindsay, yeah, because she was actually tagged in this post, so it's like her business, it's like out there in public. Her name is Lindsay Haynes, so I'm just wishing her all the best, because it's just like, can you imagine somebody just like, it's like defamation of character, pretty much, right? Right there online. I'm just like, wow, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. But I will attach the screenshots and such and the pictures she was sharing. I was like, this furniture looks cheap, and so that's why it got damaged after a year. But I mean, that's not an excuse. Obviously, she had all the intention to fix it, right? But she was never given that opportunity to. So I'm just hoping everything works out for Lindsay, especially because these things happen all the time, whereby landlords are just, because they know you are a foreigner, so they believe that, hey, let me take advantage of this. And it was just the post this landlord made. I was like, this landlord is sort of racist, and she's probably one of those locals who are against foreigners coming in. But somehow you're doing business with the foreigner, because the amount of rent these guys were paying, majority of the locals cannot even afford it, right? So it's like you're taking advantage of foreigners whom you despise, and then at the end of the day, you're trying to extort more money from them. It's like, I don't get it. But just from that post, it was filled with so much hate. So much hate for foreigners, which I don't understand why you will now rent your property, which you claim you spent your whole life savings on. But anyway, so that's it. I just hope everything works out for Miss Lindsay and her family, and that she never has to deal with this BS for the rest of her life, or at least for a while. So now tenant and landlord, right? But I mean, I could go on and on because last year there was an issue between a tenant she was actually held on a hostage for several days in her privada. So privada, it's like a gated community, right? She wasn't allowed to leave. The air got cut off, electricity, the gas. Like she and her daughter were held hostage because the landlord again was demanding for something, demanding for more money. But that issue was kind of, I mean, it was all over the Facebook pages. But ooh, I'm just hoping my case I will be allowed to leave. But then my landlords are actually very old, like they're like 70 plus, maybe 80 plus. So they don't have that energy to like hold me hostage. Plus, also I've been living in my current apartment for over 3 years. But yeah, I'm just hoping that doesn't happen to me. But yeah, so now on this channel, I created 2 other videos about rentals. So when to find affordable rent, less than $1,000 and less than $500. And somebody left a comment saying that $500 was too expensive for locals. I was like, okay, number one, this channel isn't for locals because what local will come to a YouTube channel to get tips from a complete foreigner who doesn't even know what's going on in the city? So, and of course, who would want to listen to somebody who is from a different country, who speaks a different language, different culture and such? So this channel is definitely not for locals because if this channel is for locals, it'll be in Spanish or Maya. So, yeah, and there are locals, and I also made that person who commented know that like foreigners are like really minority. My neighborhood, it's like all Mexicans. My building, it has 4 units. I'm the only non-Mexican. Okay, now the other 3 units are occupied by non-Yucatecans. So these people are not locals, but they are Mexicans as well, right? Like my whole street. So it's like foreigners are very few and far in between. So while you might think paying $500 US is very expensive, not accessible to locals, but everybody else on that street, they are Mexicans or they could be from Yucatan, from Merida. They have really good jobs. Between them and their family, they have a really good business. They live within their means or they live below their means, right? So they're able to afford to live in nice places, or sometimes the property might have been passed down to them by their father, their grandparents, or what have you, right? So people can afford stuff, right? So not everybody is broke. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing some tips on how to avoid landlord from hell. Now, these tips aren't guaranteed because sometimes you can do everything right and still end up with an unfortunate situation, but these tips hopefully will help you to avoid some opportunists pretty much. All right, so the first thing you want to make sure is to find a property that's in a really good state, in a really good neighborhood, and with a really good landlord. Now, in most cases in Mexico, even if you're going to be renting through the realtor, meaning that the realtor will take you around, show you around, and then you get to choose a property, chances are that you will get to meet the owners, the landlords. Now, one thing that I'm discovering at this stage in my life is that old people, really old people, like in their, I'll say 58 and above, are usually like they have integrity, right? They're honest for the most part, and they will deliver what they promise that they will deliver, and they're usually more reliable. You might have to wait a while, you might have to do things old school, meaning you pay them cash. Things might be slow, might be frustrating, might be whatever, but older people, they're usually more reliable and trustworthy. Okay, so now after going through that story, that drama, I want to share some tips on how to find really good landlords, really good property, affordable rent. Now, these tips are not guaranteed because sometimes, a few things might fall through the cracks, but this is just hoping that when you come over here that you would have a really good experience, because these things, they happen all the time to foreigners. People try to take advantage of you because they think, hey, you don't speak the language. Even if you do speak the language, you're not from there, or you don't know anybody, they can really mess you up. So yeah, so I'm just hoping that you would have a really good landlord-tenant relationship when you come down here. All right, so the first thing you want to do is to find a really good house. And most people will use a realtor, right? Most people will use a realtor because the realtors usually, they will take you around, show you multiple properties within your budget, sometimes outside of your budget, and in a good neighborhood, or at least in a neighborhood that they think is a good neighborhood for you. And usually after that, you will meet the landlord, because the landlord, they want to see, okay, who is renting my property, who is going to be here. And you can see, just test them out, see, okay, does this landlord look desperate? Is this landlord trying to take advantage of me? Ask them a few questions. You can ask them personal questions, such as, what inspired them to build the house or to want to rent out the property. And one thing, right, is that you want to try to find a landlord who lives in the same city. Now, Merida, because Merida real estate is much more affordable in Merida compared to other parts of Mexico. So you have a lot of people coming from bigger cities like Mexico City buying investment properties in Merida, and then they will rent them out. So the landlords might not actually live in the state of Yucatan nor in the city of Merida. So they're just somewhere else. They put some crazy price for the rent, and they try to find a foreigner to rent out the property. So you want to see that, okay, when you do your own research, right, you also want to make sure that you do your own research and not rely solely on the realtor. You want to see how much other properties are going for in that area that's around that same quality, right? Furnished, unfurnished, the streets, what have you, right? See if this landlord is just trying to take advantage of you based on your situation, right? Also try to negotiate, right? If the landlord is willing to accept maybe a lower rent or maybe some other terms, then you can judge, okay, that this landlord might actually be legit, and he or she might be a good landlord, right? So, and one thing I found that at least I'm realizing this year is that working with older people sometimes is much better because they have integrity, they're more reliable, they're more trustworthy compared to, unfortunately, the younger generation. So you might have to do with a few things, like the property might be outdated. You might have to update it yourself after moving in with your own money. Your landlord might be old school, meaning they might only prefer cash, which is my case. Your landlord might not have WhatsApp. They might just use a flip phone, and so you have to call them, which is my case. But fortunately, my landlord, so I have two landlords because they are a couple. So the wife has a smartphone, so I message her on WhatsApp. The husband has an old school phone, so, and he writes everything down, like the plumbers contact, electrician, everything. And so if I need any contact, he just pulls it out of his pocket, it gives me the number. So very old school, but it has been working for me so far. And yeah, so there might be a few things that you might have to deal with that's like old school or too traditional for you, but hey, the relationship might be a much better one compared to the younger and the newer generation who are just about money, 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 and integrity is like out the window. Now, again, I'm just generalizing here because there are very good, trustworthy, and reliable younger people who are really good landlords, even better landlords than the older ones. But this is just something that I'm realizing this year. So yeah, so you want to get a landlord that has been in the business for quite a while, and maybe they've owned that property for quite a while as well, right? Because one thing that I've been noticing is that all these dramas that I'm finding out about usually has to do with the younger landlord. I've also had my share as well. From just renting from other people. So this is why I advocate for home ownership, but that is a different video. So yeah, you want to make sure that you meet the landlord, have a conversation with them. You don't want to be desperate. Try to find maybe 2 to 3 options so that at least you can choose from it as well, right? Don't just try to rush into something, right? Because I find that all these highly priced properties, sometimes the landlords might be out there just for their own sake only. After you've met the landlord and you've decided that, okay, I want to live in your property and I want to rent it out. If it's possible, you want to maybe do a 6-month rent. If it's possible, most cases they're going to ask you for 1 year rent. If it's not possible, then definitely do the 1 year rent. And then afterwards, depending on your relationship with the landlord, then you can decide to stay longer, right? Because sometimes a few things might be broken in the house, a few things might look broken, a few things might look like they're about to break down, right? And so you want to see how fast is the landlord responding to you. Also, what is that relationship like? Some landlords could take several days to respond. Some landlords might take several weeks to respond to your issue. My landlord, the same day or the next day, they've already fixed it because they are both retired and they're just really good people. But I mean, I've heard of cases whereby, like your roof is leaking and your landlord shows up after 2 weeks to fix it. You want to be taking all those things into consideration. Now, let me go back to signing a contract. Let's go back a little bit. So in Yucatan, at least in Merida, when you sign a new contract, they will usually ask you for 4-month rent, right? So 1 month will be the month you're going to be moving in. You're going to have to pay that rent. So let's say January, you pay that rent. The second month will be for the contract. The third month will be a deposit. The fourth month will be a deposit. The fourth month rent could be avoided if you can bring in a guarantor, right? Somebody who owns a property in Yucatan and they can stand in for you in case you default on rent, right? But most people, they don't know anybody, or they don't know anybody that will trust them enough to stand in line for them, and so they have to pay all 4-month rent. Now, if your rent is about 9,000 pesos and above, usually for the contract that you have to pay for the realtor and also the notary, usually you can bring that price down to maybe 6,000 pesos, 5,000 pesos for the contract. So you don't have to pay, like, let's say 18,000 pesos for a contract, 20,000 pesos, 25,000 pesos. No. You just pay maybe 5,000, 6,000 pesos for that contract. And then you're going to have to pay for that 1 month deposit, right? In some cases, some landlords are usually quite reasonable, right? Because they know that, okay, I'm charging 20,000 pesos for this rent. Who has 60,000 pesos plus, right? Because that's the 1 month rent and a 2 month deposit. And then you have to pay for the contract fee. So some landlords might be like, okay, just pay me 1 month rent. You don't have to pay me for 2 month rent. Or if I've heard of cases whereby the person moved in, they only paid 1 month rent. They didn't even pay for a contract. They were able to get like 6-month contract or month to month, and they didn't have to pay for any deposit. So it depends on the landlord. It depends on the situation as well. But if it's like a higher price rent, like 20,000 pesos, 15,000 pesos and above, usually the landlords are usually more cautious. And also if it's furnished, right? Because sometimes people come in and they steal stuff, right? They steal stuff. So it's like there's no way to get around that. You have to pay them the 1 month or the 2 month deposit. If it's an unfurnished house in many Latin American countries is like, it's just the blocks, the walls and the roof and the floors. That's all you get. Nothing is included. No stove, no refrigerators, no AC in many cases. Some cases they might put AC, no AC. Even the light bulbs are missing. Light bulbs. So it's like in that case, the landlord might be a little bit more lenient when it comes to deposit, because it's like, hey, when you leave, what can you steal, right? Although I've heard of cases whereby somebody stole a plant, like the tenant uprooted, like it's not even like a plant in a pot. No. A plant that was planted in the soil, in the ground. The person uprooted that plant and took it away with him, right? So crazy stuff is happening out there. Or sometimes they would damage the walls and all sorts, right? So when it comes to your deposit, you want to try as much as possible to not leave more than 1 month rent in deposit. You want to try to negotiate with the landlord. And the reason for that is that some landlords are opportunists, right? So when it's time for you to move out, like what happened to this lady, right? They're going to find everything wrong about the house, right? They're going to find one tiny hole, one tiny scratch, one tiny stain on the furniture, one tiny whatever, and they're gonna want to keep your 40,000 pesos in deposit that you gave them, right? Because if your rent is about 20,000 pesos and you give them 2 month rent in deposit, 40,000 pesos, they're gonna want to keep all of that, right? Or even if you only give them 1 month rent, let's say 20,000 pesos, they're gonna want to keep all of that, even though everything could be fixed with just 5,000 pesos, right? And if you decided to fix it yourself, maybe it'll only cost you like 2,000 pesos, right? Because you're able to find somebody in the neighborhood to come and paint over the walls, or you can even fix them yourself, just fix them. So you want to try as much as possible to only give them 1 month rent in deposit, because then I guess it's a little bit easier to walk away with 20,000 pesos than 40,000 pesos. I've also heard of cases whereby some people would not even pay the last month rent. They just don't pay it. But I'm like, what if the landlord tries to give you an issue? But then I guess if the landlord wants to evict them, they don't really care because it's their last month anyway, right? And then at the end of the month, they just leave. So I've heard of cases whereby some people just don't even bother because they think that every landlord, they're not going to give back their deposit, so I'm not going to pay my rent for this month, right? And then I've also read cases about, people who work with honest landlords and the landlord actually give them the money back, or the landlord assessed, okay, so this and that, it's going to cost this much, and here's what's left over. Because sometimes your CFE bill, right? The CFE bill, which is the electricity bill, that comes every 2 months. So let's say, for example, you move out in March and your bill comes in April, right? So, and let's say you're one of those people who uses, like, let's say 2,000 pesos worth of electricity every month, then of course that's going to be on you. So because you've already left and now your bill is coming a month or two afterwards, then of course the landlord will probably want to take some money off of your deposit just so they can cover that when you move out. I mean, so also you have to look at things from the landlord's perspective as well, right? But yeah, make sure, to avoid what's going on with this lady, make sure you leave them with as little as possible when it comes to the deposit, right? But most people, I mean, I'm always like, okay, most people are honest until they've proven me wrong. So another way to find a really good landlord is to get a referral, right? So somebody is moving out of the apartment, right? They have to go back to their country, or something happened, they just couldn't live in that house anymore. And so I've seen people post on Facebook pages like, hey guys, I have to move out and this property, it's available for rent. I really like this place. I recommend the landlord. This is how much it costs. This is where it's located. If you can find something like that whereby the current tenant is actually vetting their landlord, then yeah, so I mean, that will give you a higher chance that your landlord is a good person. Now, people switch all the time, right? So there might be a complete angel to somebody and be a complete devil to somebody else. So still, that's no guarantee, but at least if somebody will go out of their way to try to find a tenant for their landlord, it shows that they probably had a really good relationship. And aside from referral from, let's say, Facebook groups, friends, or your network, another way to also find a really good tenant, right, is sometimes just walking around different neighborhoods to see what's available. And usually when you call them up, sometimes it could be the realtor, or sometimes it could be the landlord himself or herself or themselves, because sometimes you're dealing with a couple, right? And then when you go look at the house, you want to see, okay, what is the quality of the house? How does it look like? Are things falling apart already? Because sometimes you can see that, okay, this place doesn't look good. What's going on, right? Because if a landlord can show a house that's not in a good state, right? Now, what does it tell you about that landlord, right? But if everything looks clean, everything looks good, or maybe there's just one tiny thing, like for example, in my case, my toilet seat was missing, which is very common in Yucatan. Apparently, people will buy toilet, but no toilet seat. So the toilet bowl is always open. So when I signed my contract, I asked the landlord for a toilet seat, and so by the time I went back, I had not even moved in yet, because my landlord actually told me I could move in a week earlier because the apartment was empty anyway. So by the time I went back just to go take a look at things, he had already bought a toilet seat and he had installed it. So you want to look out for tiny things like that, right? Because sometimes some people, once you give them the money, that's it. They will tell you, hey, I'll do this, hey, I'll do that, but but we spend so much money renovating this place, but if you can just pay us the rent, we're gonna fix this. You give them the rent, you come back, let's say 2 weeks afterwards when you're supposed to move in, nothing was done. That means probably when it's time for you to move out, it might be very difficult for you to get your deposit back, and you might have to face this issue that this lady is facing with her tenant, right? So you want to see that, okay, are they actually doing what they tell you they're going to do? What is the state of the house? Does the house look livable, right? Or does it look like, okay, like a natural disaster had just happened? Because sometimes you walk into some homes, like it smells like moldy, you can see cracks, you can see leakages, the grass is overgrown, the property looks abandoned. So you're thinking, what? What's going on here? So yeah, you want to look for tiny details such as that, okay? And the final thing here on how to avoid landlords from hell, aside from owning your own property, because that's really the only way to avoid all this nonsense, right? The final way really to just avoid this landlord from hell sometimes could be just, just being hopeful and just being, saying a word of prayer, pretty much, right? Because it's very sad when you see these things happening to people, especially, in a case whereby you're new in the country, you came here with kids, with family, you have a busy lifestyle, and somebody now tries to take advantage of you, right? That is just not fair, right? But one thing I've realized is that usually, these things usually happen to people renting high-priced properties. So you want to make sure that you probably get something in the mid-range. So mid-range would be maybe 7,000 to 13,000 pesos, right? But then again, like, who am I to tell you how much to spend on rent? If you can afford 25,000 pesos in rent every month, hey, why not, right? Then definitely do go ahead, right? But then, you might stand a chance of somebody trying to extort from you even further. But some people, they're okay with it. They can afford it, right? And they can just, just walk away from it and move on with their lives. All right, so let me know, for those who are watching me and who are currently living in Merida, or maybe you've lived elsewhere in other parts of the world, have you had such crazy landlord-tenant situation whereby the landlord was trying to extort money from you or take advantage of you or steal from you? Because I've heard of cases of landlord trying to steal people's properties, pretty much. So yeah, let me know what your experience has been like, or just in general, right? And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe to the channel for more content and more updates. And I will see you in the next video. All right, ciao, bye.